So, the United States just shot down an Iranian drone moving aggressively towards one of our aircraft carriers. Then a few hours later, the IRGC tried to board a U.S. ship just off the Iranian coast, which is pretty risky to say the least. All of this, it was looking like President Trump was more interested in making a deal than using military force. But this might change things. And if he gives the green light, we've got more than enough military assets in the region to do some real damage to the Iranian regime. Now, CNN reported a couple hours ago, citing Captain Tim Hawkins, a U.S. Central Command spokesman, that U.S. forces shot down an Iranian drone as the unmanned aircraft aggressively approached the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier, which was transiting the Arabian Sea about 500 miles from Iran's southern coast. Captain Hawkins added that the Iranian drone continued to fly towards the ship despite de-escalatory measures taken by U.S. forces operating in international waters. Hawkins added that an F-35 fighter jet from the Lincoln shot down the drone to protect the carrier and its personnel, adding that no U.S. personnel or equipment were lost or damaged in this engagement. Now, the United States is referring to this as a Shahed 139 drone. Iran, later in today's video, you'll see calls it a 129 drone. Essentially the same. The 139 is just a modernized, a little bit upgraded version. Both of these can be used as attack drones with weapon systems attached, or they can be used simply for reconnaissance purposes. It's not clear, and I've not seen any reporting at this point if this specific drone that was shot down was armed. But it wasn't just this interception. I might argue that the next piece here was even more daring, more risky by the Iranians. A CNN reported that a few hours later, 2 Iranian gunboats approached the MV Stena Imperative, a chemical tanker operated by Americans flying under the U.S. flag in the Strait of Hormuz, passing the ship 3 times at high speeds as an Iranian drone also flew overhead. They say during one of their passes, the Iranians threatened via radio call that they would board and seize the tanker that was operating in international waters. Now the U.S. military forces operating in the region responded when they heard this threat. The USS McFall destroyer escorted the tanker away from the area, and the U.S. Air Force provided defensive air support. So no indications that any rounds were fired at all. Not even warning shots, but just moving all of those assets into the area to effectively scare the Iranians away. That's significant. That's a lot. A lot of things could have gone wrong in either one of those 2 engagements, and they happened back-to-back today, which seems like, Iran is starting to take an even more aggressive tone as Trump is trying to push them towards some sort of agreement. But before diving into the Iranian response and how the U.S. might react to all of this, a quick thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Fabric by Gerber Life. Hey, so you know how people always mention the benefits that come with joining the U.S. military? One that's always overlooked in my opinion is life insurance. When I was in, I had access to, as did everyone else who checked the box, a $400,000 life insurance policy that if I died, went straight to my family. Think about how impactful that could be, not just in the next year or 2, but over the course of their lives. And it always felt strangely comforting, like I had preemptively taken the steps to care for my loved ones even after I was gone. But eventually, I left the military and that policy went with it. So once I was back to being a civilian right away, I picked up term life insurance to cover that gap. And then when our daughter was born, I added a little more because I want her future to be secure if something unexpected happened to me. And that's why I'm proud to work with the sponsor of today's video, Fabric by Gerber Life. Fabric by Gerber Life is term life insurance that you can get done today. Made for busy parents like you. All online on your schedule right from your couch. You can be covered in under 10 minutes with no health exam required. Now, if you're young and healthy, locking in lower rates right now can make a real difference over the long term. And there's no risk. Fabric has a 30-day money-back guarantee, and you can cancel at any time. It's not like this is something you're locked into for the rest of your life. So, join the thousands of parents that trust Fabric to protect their families. Apply today at meetfabric.com/Preston. That's meetfabric.com/Preston. And thank you so much to Fabric for sponsoring today's video. Now, Iranian media has spoken about this a little bit with TSM News Agency, saying the Shahed 129 drone was on its usual and legal mission in international waters engaged in reconnaissance, monitoring, and filming, which is considered a normal and legal action. They say this drone successfully sent its reconnaissance and identification messages to the center, but then lost communication. The reason for the communication cut is being investigated, and details will be announced once confirmed. I don't know, shot in the dark, but I feel like the loss of communication was probably because he was shot down, but I guess time will tell. We'll let the investigation play out there. Now, it's not just the Iranians starting to get a little more frisky at this time. We've got the Houthis as well, the Iranian proxies and allies operating in Yemen, or at least southwest Yemen. They just issued another video or posted another video today, and they've been doing this a lot recently, which appears to be a pretty overt threat at the United States. The video here is titled, "If you return, we will also return." Now, what they're talking about is at the beginning of this second Trump administration. The U.S. kicked off a pretty significant aerial campaign against the Houthis in Yemen. After a couple months, I believe it was 50 days, the U.S. and the Houthis agreed to a ceasefire. Israel continued going back and forth. The Houthis, the U.S. backed away from that specific engagement. The Houthis now with this and other videos issuing similar threats seeming to say that if the United States returns to the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea, they will be viable targets. But here's the thing. We are in the Red Sea. We are in the Gulf of Aden. Never really left. And right now, we are in the midst of a significant U.S. military buildup in the region. So, this is what President Trump has at his disposal if he decides to go ahead with military action against Iran. Looking at a graphic here shared by Ian Ellis over on X, who does an incredible job keeping up to date with what's being moved into theater. And take this with a grain of salt because all of this stuff is classified. So it's a matter of how open source intelligence analysts can look at the different signals and then kind of interpret that to what is being moved in theater. We know the USS Abraham Lincoln is currently transiting the Arabian Sea approximately 500 miles off the Iranian coast because, well, the drone interception a couple hours ago. On board the Lincoln, we have carrier Air Wing 9 that includes F-35s, EA-18s, and FA-18 Super Hornets. There's a number of guided missile destroyers spread throughout the region from the Arabian Sea, the Gulf of Oman to the Red Sea in the Mediterranean. We've got the USS Mister, the USS McFall, the Spruant, Frank E. Peterson Jr., Michael Murphy, Roosevelt, and more. A number of littoral combat ships operating in the Persian Gulf. A couple submarines, the USS South Dakota and USS Georgia, are at undisclosed locations, but are believed to be in the general region. And then quite a few land-based aircraft, F-16s, F-15s, A-10s, F-35s, and a number of support aircraft, refuelers, reconnaissance, electronic warfare. All of that has been surged in the Middle East in recent days. On top of that, we are getting sporadic reporting that additional missile defense systems like Patriots and THAADs have been relocated to the Middle East in the event that Iran maybe carries out a preemptive attack if they think the United States is dead set on going after them, or the other case, there is an Iranian response after a U.S. and/or Israeli attack inside of Iran. Now, here's the thing. It actually seemed like the progress was moving along relatively smoothly. Now, personal opinions aside, and I'll get into those here at the end of today's video, I wish the United States had acted sooner. I think there was a lot of room for us to influence, the direction of the Iranian regime to be blunt, and maybe even assist in their downfall. And I think we may have missed that opportunity. But in the last few days, it seemed like we were actually moving more in the direction of talking things out. Some sort of nuclear deal, if you will. And it looks like the U.S. is still kind of focused on that as an option. In fact, White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt was asked about these attacks earlier today, or these incidents, I should say. Attack might not be the right way to frame it. These incidents earlier today, and she says, hey, talks are still moving. We are still planning on engaging with the Iranians. Today, I did speak with folks over at the Pentagon this morning, who said that CENTCOM acted both appropriately and necessarily to protect our U.S. personnel and equipment in the region. So CENTCOM did make the decision to shoot down that Iranian drone. It was unmanned. It was acting aggressively towards our USS Lincoln, which we know that aircraft carrier is in the region at the direction of President Trump. As for the president, he remains committed to always pursuing diplomacy first. But in order for diplomacy to work, of course, it takes two to tango. You need a willing partner to engage. And so that's something the president and Special Envoy Witkoff are exploring and discussing right now. Special Envoy Witkoff is set to have conversations with the Iranians later this week. Those are still scheduled as of right now. But of course, the president has always a range of options on the table, and that includes the use of military force. The Iranians know that better than anyone. Just look no further than the highly successful Operation Midnight Hammer, which took not just Iran, but the entire world by surprise and completely obliterated their nuclear capabilities earlier last year. Now, on the Iranian side of things, they seem to have been for a while now, just kind of preparing that the United States is going to attack. And I get it from their perspective. Like, that makes sense. That's probably the right way to view all of this. And to be fair, when the 12-day war kicked off, the United States was saying left and right that we are still talking. In fact, very similar to the vibes we're getting right now where it's, let's just wait for the talks this weekend. And then the planes are in the air, striking targets. The Israeli planes at that point, striking targets inside of Iran. So if you are Iran, it probably makes sense even as the next round of talks are being scheduled to assume that military action could be happening any moment now. Now to that end, the Iranian Supreme Leader has been pretty aggressive in his statements the last couple days. Just yesterday, he said, quote, "The Americans should know that if they start a war this time, it will be a regional war," adding that Iran stands firm and will continue to stand firm, and God willing will put an end to the United States' mischief and harassment. Now, it's not just the words coming out of some of the Iranian leadership talking about a kind of threatening if the United States takes action. We're seeing actions on the ground where they are kind of reinforcing some facilities that we saw attacked right at the end of the 12-day war. The Institute for Science and International Security, whose handle over on X is the good ISIS because, that's tough. Feel like you should probably change that at some point. But anyways, they released some new imagery that just came out on January 29th that I'll show here. And they linked a rather detailed report that I'll have in the description below if you want to go into more detail here, where they say this new imagery shows activity at the tunnel entrances at Esfahan nuclear site. As of today, so again, January 29th, Iran has rearied the middle entrance with soil and is adding more fresh soil to the southernmost entrance. The northernmost entrance, which was reworked after the June 2025 strike and hardened in recent months, appears to remain open, but vehicles are present nearby. The road leading to the middle and northern tunnel entrances shows additional dump trucks filled with soil moving in their direction, presumably at this time to add more soil to the middle entrance, covering these entrances, trying to reinforce some of these areas to prevent damage to the nuclear facilities. They say Iran is likely reburying the entrances in an effort to protect them from possible near-future military strikes. It did so last just before America struck during the 12-day war. A lot of questions with this one, right? Like, what are you protecting in the nuclear facilities, right? If we saw these actions elsewhere around the country, it'd be one thing. But what's going on at Esfahan, right? What are they protecting down there? Which might be some of the reason we've seen this new focus from President Trump in recent days really trying to move back to the negotiating table around a nuclear deal. We've got some reporting in the last couple days here that President Trump is really insisting on 4 demands when it comes to talks with Iran. The entire removal of the Iranian nuclear program, halting of their ballistic missile program, ceasing all funding in support of proxy groups in the region, and then a new one here, proper treatment of protesters who participated in anti-regime demonstrations. You'll notice what's missing in there is anything about regime change. And it doesn't really seem, again, we're kind of getting into the personal assessment here. I don't think that's necessarily in the cards. I don't think that's what the U.S. administration is pursuing right now in Iran. And I would argue that as the protests were kicking off in January, the time to effect any sort of regime change with where they were showing a lot of cracks in the foundation was then. We didn't do anything. From what I can tell, we didn't do anything. We didn't help stand up additional infrastructure for the protesters to get their word out. We didn't carry out cyber or electronic warfare attacks to shut down regime communications. We certainly didn't carry out any sort of lethal strikes targeting regime officials or even some of the secret police and their facilities. Nothing at all. It sounds more and more like what President Trump is trying to get to is an agreement. Ideally, an agreement where we don't have to use military force. And this might have to do with this renewed activity around some of the Iranian nuclear sites, suggesting that those facilities, that program may not be as down and out as we once thought. Now, in terms of what to expect from the United States here in the coming days, I don't think we're going to see a response, or I don't think we're going to see like a direct tit for tat as it relates to the drone being shot down and the attempted seizure of the U.S. ship in the region. The U.S. stopping both of those was signal enough in a lot of ways, and no U.S. personnel or equipment were lost. So, we did kind of come out of those. Because they were aggressive moves by Iran, no doubt, but we did kind of come out of those with the upper hand, kind of shutting both attempts down. Now, again, I do think President Trump probably wants to pursue a diplomatic solution here. I mean, Everything seems to point to that. We had the assets in the region a while ago to be able to carry out at least limited strikes, and starting about a week ago, to carry out significant sustained attacks against the Iranian regime, and we're not. It does seem like President Trump is trying to give a lot of room for the diplomatic solution, but he might be getting backed into a corner here. I mean, for one, we have the red line that he laid out about do not mistreat the protesters. And he said that after protesters had already been shot in the streets. We knew that red line was crossed. And now Iran's striking a much more defiant tone. I mean, directly going after, you can argue whether the recon drone was going after or just monitoring, but that's an escalation. Putting a military drone over military aircraft carriers, and then trying to seize a U.S. vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. Both of those are escalatory. Now, in terms of timing, again, we have had the resources in the region to be able to carry out a significant strike for quite a while. So, we're kind of at this point of having to determine, are we holding because they're trying to make room for negotiations, or are we holding for an additional buildup that will be much larger and means that the following campaign could be much more significant and much longer in duration than any of us have really expected to this point? I don't think it's entirely clear quite yet the direction President Trump is trying to go, but either way, the Iranian actions in the last 24 hours are likely pushing him closer and closer to using the military option. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.